Actor Paul Walker of the Fast and Furious franchise killed in a car crash, and he was just 40 years old.
Walker died Saturday when the Porsche he was riding in crashed and burst into flames. Coroner Ed Winters said Walker and the driver died within seconds of the crash.
They say dead men tell no tales. Yet inside Paul Walker's private garage, a different story quietly waited to be revealed. 12 years after his tragic accident, the world was finally given a rare glimpse into the place where he spent some of his final days. What lay behind those doors was more than just a collection of cars. It was a deeply personal snapshot of his life, passions, and unfinished moments. Every detail, from the vehicles to the atmosphere itself, carried a sense of mystery and emotion. What was discovered inside left many surprised, reflective, and completely unprepared for the impact it would have. The myth of the movie star mechanic. Paul Walker was the face of the most famous car movies in history. To most people, he was just a lucky actor who got paid to drive fast. They saw him as Brian O'Connor, the guy with the blue Skyline and the silver Supra. It is easy to think he just showed up, read his lines, and went home to a normal life. But the truth is much cooler than that. Paul was a gearhead maybe long before he ever met a movie director. He actually knew cars down to the smallest bolt and didn't just play the part of a guy that did. Most actors have people who do the dirty work for them. They have assistants to wash their cars and mechanics to fix their engines. But Paul was not like that. He was the kind of guy who would spend his entire weekend covered in oil and grease. Maybe it helped that he grew up in a family that loved racing. His grandfather was a professional racer who drove factory cars for Ford, so that love for speed was in his blood. When he was a young boy, he spent his time watching his dad work on cars in the driveway. By the time he was a teenager, he was already hunting for parts and learning how to make engines run better. When the first Fast and Furious movie came out in 2001, the fans went crazy. They loved the racing and the neon lights. But Paul was looking at the cars with a different eye. He actually helped pick out some of the vehicles used in the films. He wanted the movie to feel real to the people who actually lived that life. He would talk to the stunt drivers and the mechanics on set for hours, wanting to know about things like turbo sizes and suspension settings. He even did many of his own driving stunts because he was actually good enough to do them safely. While other stars were out at fancy parties, Paul was often at the track. He competed in real racing series like the Red Line Time Attack. He drove a BMW M3 and showed everyone that he had real skills behind the wheel. He definitely proved that he was a driver who could hold his own against pros. He used his fame to get closer to the car world he loved so much and started a shop called Always Evolving. Paul lived two different lives. In one life, he was a massive star with millions of fans, and in the other life, he was just a guy in a t-shirt and jeans who loved the sound of a roaring engine. He kept his massive car collection a total secret from the public because did not want to show off. He just wanted a place where he could be himself. But after the crash in 2013, that secret world was about to be blown wide open. The doors to his private vault were finally ready to turn, and what people saw inside changed everything they thought they knew about him. The Valencia Vault. The location where Paul kept his heart was a plain building in Valencia, California. From the outside, you would never guess it held anything special. It was just an industrial unit with no big signs or bright lights. It looked like every other warehouse on the block, and this was intentional. Paul wanted a place where he could disappear and just be a guy who loved engines. This was the home of Always Evolving, the shop he started with his close friend Roger Rodas. When the large metal doors finally rolled up after the accident, the first thing that hit people was the sheer size of the collection. It was not just a few nice cars, but a massive sea of metal that stretched into the back of the building. Row after row of vehicles sat parked in the dim light. Some were tucked under soft covers to keep them clean, while others sat out in the open, ready to be driven. It felt less like a celebrity garage and more like a high-end museum that had been frozen in time. The tools were all in their right places, and there were lifts for raising cars and workbenches covered in parts. You could see that people actually spent time here getting their hands dirty. Even though the owner was one of the most famous men on earth, the space felt humble. It was clear that the person who built this collection did not care about showing off to the world, but about the machines themselves. As the people walked deeper into the vault, they started to realize the value of what was sitting right in front of them. There were rare supercars from Europe, classic American muscle cars with huge engines, and iconic Japanese racers that are hard to find in the United States. It was a perfect mix of everything a true driver would want. There were even some motorcycles and trucks mixed in. It was a hoard of automotive history gathered by one man over many years. But as the team began to count the cars and check the titles, they noticed something very strange. The math did not add up. Some of the most famous cars that were supposed to be there were nowhere to be found. The peaceful feeling of the garage was about to vanish as they realized that in the hours right after the crash, someone had been busy. A huge mystery was growing, and it was starting to look like a heist had happened right under their noses. The 24 hours of chaos. When the news of the crash hit the world on November 30th, 2013, everything stopped. But while fans were crying and lights were being dimmed in Hollywood, a very different kind of scene was playing out at Paul's secret warehouse. Within just 24 hours of his death, the peace of that sanctuary was shattered. A man named Richard Taylor, who worked at the warehouse and helped take care of the cars, allegedly decided to take advantage of the tragedy. Instead of protecting Paul's legacy, Taylor and a group of helpers reportedly began moving cars out of the building in the middle of the night in a bid to hide them. More than 30 vehicles vanished from the collection before the sun even came up. It was a high-stakes heist that happened while the world was still in shock. The list of missing cars was staggering. It included a 2011 Porsche 911 GT3 RS, a 2008 BMW M3, and several rare trucks and classic cars. For months, the Walker family had no idea where these cars had gone. When they asked for the vehicles back, they were met with silence or excuses. It turns out that Taylor was allegedly trying to hide the paperwork and the titles too. He was basically holding the cars hostage. The estate claimed he was trying to extort money from them, using Paul's favorite machines as leverage. It was a messy, ugly situation that felt like a slap in the face to everything Paul stood for. The legal war that followed was intense. Paul's father and his estate had to file a massive lawsuit to get the collection back. They accused Taylor of conversion, which is a fancy legal word for stealing someone's property and treating it as your own. For a long time, it looked like these cars might be gone forever, sold off to private collectors who did not care about their history. But the family did not give up. They fought in court for over a year to track down every single VIN number and every hidden trailer. Finally, in 2016, a deal was reached. The lawsuit was settled, and the cars were ordered to be returned to the Walker estate. It was a huge victory, but it left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. The sanctuary had been violated by someone Paul actually trusted. But even with the cars back, a new question came up. Why did Paul have so many of the exact same car? The lightweight strategy. When they were perusing the warehouse, the team found something that did not make sense at first. Most car collectors want one of everything. They want a Ferrari, then a Porsche, then a Lamborghini. But Paul was different. He had 5 identical white BMW M3s sitting in a row. They were all the same year, same color, and had the same huge wings on the back. To a normal person, it looked like he just forgot he already bought one. But to a car expert, this was a stroke of genius. These BMWs were unlike your regular ones. They were called the M3 Lightweight. You see, back in 1995, BMW wanted to make a car for racing, so they stripped out everything that made the car heavy. They took out the air conditioning, the radio, and even took out the insulation that keeps the cabin quiet. They used aluminum for the doors and added a special checkered flag decal on the front and back. Only about 126 of these cars were ever made. Having one is a dream for most people, and Paul had 5. People wondered why he wanted so many of the exact same car. It turns out Paul was playing a very smart, long game. He knew that as time went on, these cars would become legendary. He saw them as more than just fun machines to drive at the track. They were a rock-solid investment for him. At least they were supposed to be. Some people close to him said he viewed these 5 cars as a retirement fund or a way to make sure his daughter, Meadow, was always taken care of. This strategy was brilliant because it showed how much he understood the car market. He knew that the world was moving toward heavy, complicated cars with too many computers. He knew that one day, people would crave a raw, simple driving experience again. His buying up of a large chunk of the world's supply of lightweights meant he was holding onto a piece of history that could only go up in value. He kept them in amazing condition, with some having very few miles on the odometer. When these cars finally went to auction years later, the world saw that Paul was right. They sold for record-breaking prices, with some going for over $300,000 each, proving that he was a master of the market. The Federal Raid and the Skyline secret. While Paul loved his BMWs, his true passion was for a car that was technically a criminal in the eyes of the American government. This was the Nissan Skyline R34 GTR. In the movies, it was his signature ride, and in real life, it was a legal nightmare. Because of strict import laws, these Japanese monsters were banned from being driven on United States roads. But Paul was not the kind of guy to let a few rules stop him from owning his dream machine. To get these cars into the country, a company called Kaizo Industries found a sneaky loophole. They would buy the cars in Japan, strip out the engines, and ship them to America as kit cars. Since they had no engines, the government did not count them as real cars. Once they landed in California, the mechanics would drop the high-powered engines back in and register them under a new name. Paul was right in the middle of this. He worked closely with Kaizo to build a Bayside Blue Skyline that was modified exactly to his taste. He famously told them he did not want a sticker bomber with flashy decals. What he wanted was a clean, pure, and incredibly fast machine. However, the government was not stupid. Not long after the filming of the fourth movie wrapped up, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI began to close in. They realized that Kaizo was using a loophole to bypass safety and emissions laws. In a series of dramatic raids, the feds began seizing these Skylines across the country. Paul's favorite movie car, the one he personally helped design, was snatched up and impounded. It sat in a government lot for years, caught in a massive legal battle that threatened to have the car crushed into a cube of scrap metal. The pressure was intense. Paul had several other Skylines in his private collection, and each one was a risk. He knew the feds could show up at his warehouse at any moment, and his name was all over the paperwork, making him a primary target in the investigation. He was fighting for the right to keep these icons of Japanese engineering alive in a country that wanted them gone. The battle for the Blue Skyline lasted until 2012, just a year before his death. It was eventually saved from the crusher, but was ordered to be exported out of the country. It ended up in Germany, safe from the American feds. The secret engineer. Everybody knows that Paul was a massive movie star, but inside the garage, he was a student of the machine. When the experts began looking through the cars in his collection, they found something that most celebrities would never bother with. They found proof that Paul was essentially a self-taught engineer. He bought cars, not to look at them sitting pretty in his garage, but to understand how they work, why they failed, and how to make them perfect. Tucked away in the glove boxes and center consoles of his favorite rides, investigators found stacks of paperwork. These were detailed logs written in Paul's own hand. He would take a car out to the track or a quiet canyon road and push it to its limit. Then, he would pull over, grab a pen, and start taking notes. He wrote about the way the tires felt when they were cold versus when they were hot. He wrote about the turn-in of the steering and whether the back of the car felt loose or planted. The man recorded everything. These notes were incredibly technical. He would write down specific numbers for suspension settings and tire pressures. He even kept track of how different types of fuel changed the way the engine responded. To Paul, a car was like a living thing that you had to listen to. He was obsessed with the feel of the drive. If a car did not handle perfectly, he would sit down with his mechanics and go over his notes to figure out a solution together. One of the most impressive things they found were track maps. Paul would draw out the corners of a racetrack and mark exactly where he should hit the brakes and where he should start accelerating. He was analyzing his own driving like a professional racer. He wanted to be faster and more efficient every single time he got behind the wheel. This was not a hobby for him, but a craft that he practiced with total focus. This secret side of Paul is what made him so respected in the car community. Real car enthusiasts can spot a fake from a mile away. They knew Paul was the real deal because he spoke the language of valves and gear ratios. He spent his own time and money to learn the science of speed. He was a man who looked at a beautiful car and saw a puzzle to be solved. The sleeper projects. Paul loved rare sports cars, but he had a secret soft spot for vehicles that looked completely normal. In the car world, these are called sleepers. A sleeper is a car that looks like a slow, boring grocery getter on the outside, but hides a monster under the hood. Paul was obsessed with this idea. He did not always want to be the center of attention in a bright orange Supra. Sometimes he just wanted to blend in, while still having enough power to leave everyone in the dust. One of the coolest examples of this was his 1995 Ford Bronco. To most people, this was just an old SUV from the 90s, but Paul chose this specific year because it was the last of its kind, and he kept it in perfect shape. It had a big V8 engine and only 30,000 miles on it. While other stars were buying brand new Lamborghinis, Paul was cruising around in a classic white and tan Bronco. He loved the rugged, simple look of it. He even had a 2006 Toyota Tundra that he decked out for camping and off-road trips. It was silver, simple, and built to be reliable. These were cars for a man who actually used his vehicles for real life, not just for photos. He also had a deep love for old-school American utility. His collection included things like a 1963 Chevrolet Nova wagon and a 1964 Chevelle wagon. These are the kinds of cars your grandmother might have used to go to the store. But in Paul's hands, they were transformed. He worked with top builders to make sure these wagons could handle like modern sports cars. He loved the surprise factor and liked the idea of pulling up to a stoplight in a family wagon and outrunning a loud sports car. It was his way of keeping the car culture human and fun. His 2000 Audi S4 was another perfect sleeper. It was a plain silver four-door car that most people would ignore in a parking lot. But inside, it had a twin-turbo engine and a 6-speed manual transmission. It was a driver's car through and through. Paul kept it clean and modest, proving that he did not need wings or loud exhaust pipes to enjoy a drive. He appreciated the engineering and the stealth. These sleeper projects showed a side of Paul that the movies never, ever portrayed. They showed a man who valued substance over style. He did not need the world to know how fast he was going. He just needed to know it for himself. This humble approach to cars was a reflection of how he lived his life. He was a guy who used his massive platform to do good without shouting about it. In fact, many of the most powerful cars in his garage were actually being saved for a mission that had nothing to do with racing and everything to do with saving lives. Reach out worldwide. While Paul spent millions on his cars, his biggest passion had nothing to do with fame or fast engines, but people. In 2010, a massive earthquake hit Haiti and left the country in ruins. Paul did not just send a tweet or write a check from his couch. He grabbed a few friends, loaded up a plane with medical supplies, and flew straight into the disaster zone. He spent days on the ground, sleeping in the dirt, and helping people who had lost everything. He saw that while big groups were good at raising money, they were often too slow to get help to the people who needed it most. He decided to change that. When he got back, he started a group called Reach Out Worldwide. He wanted a team of doctors, nurses, and firefighters who could drop in as soon as a disaster hit. Paul funded the entire thing with his own money for years. He did not want any government grants because he did not want anyone telling him who he could or could not help. He also refused to use the charity for PR. Most people had no idea that when a tornado hit Alabama or a typhoon hit the Philippines, the guy running the chainsaw and clearing the roads was a Hollywood superstar. He would often show up in a hat and a t-shirt, working for hours in the heat alongside regular volunteers. He once said that his acting career was just a way to pay for his real job, which was helping people. He felt that the fame from the movies gave him the tools to do something much more important. Even on the day he died, he was hosting a charity event for the victims of Typhoon Haiyan. He was trying to raise money to send more medical teams to the Philippines. He was literally spending his last hours thinking about how to help people thousands of miles away. Inside his garage, the mission was visible too. Several of the cars had stickers and decals for the charity. He used his personal vehicles to tow trailers and move supplies. He even planned to use some of his most valuable cars to fund the group's future missions. He saw his collection not just as a pile of metal, but as a resource for good. He was building a bridge between the world of car culture and the world of human service. After he passed away, his brother Cody and his daughter Meadow made sure the work did not stop. The group is still active today, responding to disasters all over the globe. Paul's dream of a fast, agile team of helpers is very much alive. But to keep that dream going, the family eventually had to make a very hard choice. They had to say goodbye to the cars Paul loved so much. This led to a historic day in Arizona, where the vault was finally emptied for everyone to see. The Barrett-Jackson Reckoning. By 2020, the time had finally come to let the world see what Paul Walker had built behind closed doors. The setting was the Barrett-Jackson auction in Scottsdale, Arizona. This was a massive event, with thousands of people watching in person and millions more following online. There were 21 vehicles from Paul's private collection ready to cross the block. This included 18 cars and 3 motorcycles. Every single one of them was being sold with no reserve, which meant they would go to the highest bidder, no matter how low the price. The energy in the room was electric. When the first few cars rolled out, the bidding was fast and aggressive. People were buying a piece of a legacy, and they were excited to be doing so. The star of the show was the row of white BMW M3 lightweights. As we mentioned before, these were his prize jewels. The very best one, which had only 4,600 miles on it, stunned the crowd. The price kept climbing higher and higher until the hammer finally fell at $385,000. That was more than double the previous world record for that kind of car. It was not just the rare BMWs that brought in the big bucks. Even the cars that looked like normal daily drivers sold for way more than anyone expected. His 1995 Ford Bronco, the one he loved for its simple and rugged style, sold for over $73,000. His silver Nissan 370Z from the movie Fast 5 went for over $100,000, setting another record for that model. Even his Audi S4, which had some peeling paint and visible wear, sold for nearly $30,000. It was clear that the Walker Premium was very real. Fans and collectors wanted anything that Paul had touched and cared for. By the end of the week, the total for the collection reached a staggering $2.33 million. It was a massive success that proved Paul had an incredible eye for value. But the best part of the story is where that money went. Every single cent from the auction was put into a trust for his daughter, Meadow. It was the final act of a father who had spent years carefully picking out the right cars to ensure his family would be okay. The vault was empty, and the cars were scattered to new homes all across the world. But while the physical collection was gone, the story of why he built it was just beginning to settle in. This leads us to the final chapter of Paul's life. A father's final gift. The real story of the Valencia warehouse ends with a legacy far greater than a collection of fast cars or rare machines. When the final engine went silent, and the building was eventually cleared out, what remained was not just an empty space, but the realization of a deeply personal mission. Paul Walker had quietly been building something much more meaningful than a garage full of prized vehicles. Every rare BMW, every custom-built truck, and every carefully stored part represented a piece of a larger vision. A safety net designed to protect the person he loved most, his daughter, Meadow Walker. What may have looked like a passion project to outsiders was, in reality, a thoughtful and deliberate plan. Paul understood that success could be fleeting, but preparation could last generations. The warehouse was not just a symbol of his love for cars, it was a symbol of his responsibility as a father. Each asset was chosen with care, ensuring that Meadow would always have something to fall back on, no matter what the future held. It was a quiet form of love, one expressed not through words but through foresight and action. Meadow took that legacy and transformed it into something even more expansive. Rather than simply preserving what her father left behind, she chose to amplify its purpose. She founded the Paul Walker Foundation, an initiative that reflects Paul's lifelong passion for the ocean and scientific discovery. Long before he became a global star, Paul had studied marine biology and developed a deep respect for marine ecosystems. That passion never left him, even as his career took him in a completely different direction. Today, the foundation carries that passion forward in a powerful way. It provides grants and scholarships to students and researchers dedicated to protecting oceans and marine wildlife. These programs are not just symbolic gestures, they are meaningful investments in the future of the planet. Through this work, Paul's success continues to ripple outward, supporting the next generation of scientists, conservationists, and explorers. His name, once associated primarily with blockbuster films, is now tied to environmental preservation and global impact. But the legacy does not end at the water's edge. Another organization Paul built from the ground up continues to make a difference around the world. Reach Out Worldwide remains active, responding to natural disasters with the same speed and efficiency that defined its early days. Paul founded the group after witnessing the devastation of the 2010 Haiti earthquake, determined to create a system that could deliver help quickly and effectively. Unlike many large organizations, Reach Out Worldwide operates with agility. Because Paul personally funded it for years, the group developed a unique independence. This allows teams to deploy directly to areas where help is needed most, without delays or excessive bureaucracy. They clear debris, provide medical assistance, and support communities in crisis, all while carrying forward the mission Paul started. His philosophy was simple but powerful. A life is measured not by what you accumulate, but by how many people you help along the way. In many ways, this ongoing work is the true continuation of what began in that Valencia warehouse. While the cars themselves may no longer be there, the intention behind them lives on. The warehouse may stand empty, but its purpose has expanded beyond anything it once contained. It has become a symbol of how passion, when paired with purpose, can create lasting change. Paul Walker's story is no longer just about speed, fame, or Hollywood success. It is about legacy, one built on love, responsibility, and action. Through Meadows' leadership and the organizations he inspired, his influence continues to move forward, touching lives across the globe. And that leaves an interesting question. If you were handed the keys to that warehouse today, knowing everything it represented, what would you do? Would you sell the collection and transform your own life overnight? Or would you hold on to it, preserving a vision that was never really about the cars at all? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.